Hello everyone. I'm Alice. I'm the social media manager for Jubilance, and today I'm talking to Rachel. Rachel is a New York City actress and feminist activist, and we're going to talk about growing up as a woman, being an actress entrepreneur, and her new play that she's working on. So, welcome, Rachel. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So we want to start off with some kind of like more fun questions to get us going. Okay, champagne or beer?
Oh, it really depends on the situation. Hi, actually, champagne of beers, Miller High Life. I'm gonna go there.
Oh, okay.
When I get off work, honestly, that's what I want.
Perfect. That sounds nice. Okay, chocolate or cheese?
Oh, Alice, these are too hard.
I mean,
Cheese.
I'd just say
I
both.
always go
But...
cheese. Cheese. I'm a savory gal.
Okay, great. And what about tampon or a pad?
I actually was using the Diva Cup for a long time, and now I don't use anything because I have an IUD and I don't really bleed.
What? That's amazing.
But I'm a huge fan of the Diva Cup. I was using OB tampons before that.
Okay. What IUD do you have?
I have the generic of the Mirena, and I got it for free at Planned Parenthood. Just saying. I've had it for a couple years now.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I
but I
would
don't
love
really
to
bleed.
never have a period ever again. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yay, Diva Cups too.
Amazing.
Mhm.
Can you talk about where you're from and what made you move to New York City?
Yeah. Where I'm from as you might know, is a slightly complicated answer, but I moved around a lot. I was born in Indianapolis, but I only lived there till I was like 4. I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm from there. So I lived all over, and before New York, I was in Chicago, which I kind of say is home. And although I have no family there, but um, and then I got into grad school here in New York. I always knew I wanted to move to New York. I think I felt like maybe it sounds kind of corny, but I always felt like I was a New Yorker before I was ever in New York, and turned out to be a good fit.
That's wonderful. What's your favorite part about being a New Yorker?
Oh, bodegas. No, 24-hour bodega. Yeah, it's hard to put your finger on, right? Because there's so much, but I just think it's like I really enjoy the pace of the city. I enjoy like being able to come back to where I live. I live on the border of Brooklyn, Queens now, and like
Oh,
it feels neighborhoody and like home, but also I can go into Manhattan, and I I just think there's a lot of opportunity to be had here. Yeah.
that's wonderful. Um, and part of your background is I know you grew up in Brazil for your high school experience. Can
Yeah.
you talk about some cultural differences that you see between the United States and São Paulo?
Oh, sure.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. São Paulo. Yeah. I lived in São Paulo from 2000 to 2005. My mom's job moved us there, and it's the cultural differences are huge. I think probably for me the biggest one is the there's this I can't really there's a term in Portuguese that's not really translatable, but it's called projeto. So like your way, the person's way of being. And there's this sort of passionate, very open quality that Brazilians have that I feel like most Americans don't. And that's not negative nor positive, just that it's just the difference. And for example, like in other European countries too, like as soon as you see someone, like when I would get to high school in the morning, there would be like all my group of friends, right? We'd all be standing there. And before I could start class, I would have to go around to every single one and give two cheek kisses.
Wow.
Yeah, un beijinho. Every single person, like I'd have to go around. And so like little things like that, where people are very much, physical touch there is very different than here. And, but also being older and wiser and woker, I am kind of like, but sometimes that was problematic. Like I think about like, oh wait, was that okay? But I think like people are the culture is even more sexualized, I would say, actually.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
in here.
How so?
Um, I mean, like even in just like things like Carnival, like Mardi Gras, essentially, like it's really normal to just like have naked women on the streets, you know? And I think women's bodies are still are overly sexualized there, but in a way that is integrated into the culture that isn't here. Also, there's just like, there were always like billboards for Playboy, or like nudity and things like that weren't so
Yeah, taboo in a way.
right. Yes, they were just, it was just, I hesitate to say normal, because I also think that there are problems with in the culture in that way, in Brazilian culture, but it's just more integrated. It's just more inherent, sort of, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
People are so friendly.
That's
They're the
great.
most friendly. Yeah. They're amazing. They're amazing. I love and miss Brazil every day.
Wow. And can you talk about your step-by-step process of how you've gotten to be where you are now in Brooklyn and actress? And you were telling me before this about some projects that you've just been working on. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. I saw that question before we started, and I was like, process. Oh, I'm not a very step-by-step person. So I'll start by saying that I'm very much like, not like I'm completely disorganized and all over the place, but I definitely could plan more than I do. No, you know, I studied theater in undergrad too, but it hasn't always been my whole life. I feel like I think what's really important about being any kind of artist, but being an actor, is um, having as many other experiences as you can that aren't theater based, because I just think that makes you a better storyteller.
Completely agree.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important too, as far as, you know, empathy and understanding other experiences. And I so anyways, but I was then in Chicago as a working actor for some time, about 5 years before I moved to New York, and I just felt like there was a ceiling I was hitting there in a way, and I couldn't. I didn't think I was going to really actually be able to make a living doing
Mm.
things that weren't, maybe not just acting, but like things connected to my artistic passions. So I thought grad school was the answer. And I thought that that would be the best way to enter into New York too, as opposed to just moving here.
Mm.
I now, having done grad school here, I don't know that that is the right way, to be honest. Because I have a ton of debt. But I think, but that's the path I took. And I got in and I saved up some money. I've worked in the restaurant industry for 14 years. So I worked my butt off at a restaurant, saved up some money, and moved myself out here and started grad school. Been out of grad school for, gosh, what is it? Over 2 years now.
Yeah. Weird.
Super weird. And you know, I keep reminding myself that this is the long game. And yeah, I just knew I needed to get an agent. There's so many, I'm like, how do I can't concisely like, I did get an agent and started going on TV auditions, and
Woo!
yeah, woohoo, I booked a pilot like 6 months out of my grad program, and I was like, whoa, couldn't believe it. Like a recurring role on it too, not just, and it was this huge production, and it had really amazing people attached to the project, and it was for NBC Universal, and everyone was like, and I got paid super well, and I had like a trailer down the street from the restaurant I work at. I was like, what are my worlds? And I was just I was like, this is amazing. And it went so well, you know, what a paycheck. And then it didn't get picked up. And right, which happens all the time, but it really, that was feeling that was I've become pretty used to rejection. You kind of have to be in this. Like you do 20 auditions and hope that you book one, maybe not. And that it becomes really hard to know. That can really mess with your brain of like, is it me? Is it this industry? Like, why am I not? So anyways, it didn't happen. I can't get my footage. I still haven't been able to even see any of my pilot footage.
Wow.
I can't even get that for a reel, which for an actor is
That's
really
so crazy. I
yeah.
thought they would at least give you it for your reel.
Nope. Once because the pilot never aired, NBC doesn't have to give
Oh,
anything. Yeah, I reached
they own the rights.
everything. Yeah, I couldn't get it.
Wow.
So that was a huge bummer, and I didn't book any TV work, like any SAG-AFTRA union work, until like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It was a year and a half ago, and I booked a small co-star role on a new show that'll be out in next year. They're shooting the season right now called Lincoln, and so I shot that last week, which was exciting. But it just goes to show like how hard it is. No small feat just to book one line on a TV show. And in the meantime, I have to really keep all of my other like passionate artistic endeavors going. So
Can you talk about that? So what are you working on right now? You have a
I have
a show that you're working on.
Yeah, I have a solo show. It's called Woke Pussy. And I've never done this before. I never considered myself a writer or anything, but I have journaled my whole life. And I got out of a 3.5-year relationship a little over 2 years ago, and found myself in my early 30s in New York using dating apps for the first time and dating. And I found I really I really enjoy meeting new people. And I'll say like I'm a very sexual person, and I'm very connected to myself in that way, and I'm enjoyed just sex and things like that as well. And so I was sort of just like looking out there for experiences, right? Not necessarily like finding a relationship at the time. But I started rubbing up against like navigating my feminism and how I feel about, and like the tenets of like feminism, which, you know, they're personal, but and dating and men. And I'm straight, but I think that I don't identify as queer. I tend to say like heteroflexible because I am attracted to women, but I was mostly dating men, right? And I was like having a lot of inner conflict and contradiction about my feminism and like self-respect and sense of self while dating. So I started keeping a log, and I kept a log of every single person I went on a date with. And it just began as me journaling.
Wow.
Really, it was just like me journaling, trying to process my experiences. And then I realized I was like logging each one, like name, age, what the date was, like what they did, occupation. And I went back to this, and then I started this silly thing on Instagram called Toilet Time. And it literally just came out of like a random moment where I said toilet time, and I started filming myself while I was actually peeing on the toilet. You can just see my face, don't worry. And I started talking about dating, and people were into it. And I started getting a lot of responses. I was like, this is really funny. So I kept doing it, and I kind of integrated that. One night I just sat down and I was like, what if I just made this into a show?
Cool.
And I drafted a quick script, and honestly half-assed script, and randomly submitted it to a couple places, forgot about that, and like a couple months later got an acceptance letter from United Solo Fest for this. And but honestly I panicked. I went, oh, I actually have to do this.
That's awesome.
So that's sort of and I'm still in the process of making it. It's November 6th. Yeah.
That's amazing. So it's kind of chronicling your time dating in New York.
Yes.
Cool.
And it's that, and it's like, I want to say navigating and sort of balancing my feminism, the dissatisfaction also with the system. And really, I think dissatisfaction is a tame term to use about how I feel about what's wrong. But then also coming to like a self-acceptance is sort of the journey of this character. She's not quite me. She's me, but like she's not totally me.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Wow. Oh, I can't wait for it. So I will be there. I just have to like get my ticket still.
Yeah, I've been bad about promoting it, so I also have
Yeah.
to promote.
Send it to me.
I will.
Can you talk about what is the most rewarding part of being an actress?
Yeah, that's tough too. I love performing live.
Mm.
Um, I I deal with like a lot. I feel like I'm a very high energy person, you know, and I can kind of go and not realize that I'm burnt out. Um, and performing live, which unfortunately isn't something you get to do all that often as a working actor, I'm finding for me, my path, right, in New York. I feel like most myself when I get to perform live. And I think there's something really special about that feeling and that connection of like being live in front of an audience and staring at them and having them stare back at you and sort of seeing each other. And that is what also excites me most about performing is my relationship with the people who are there to see the work.
Mm.
um the feeling that I get from that is probably the most rewarding, and it doesn't come often.
Yeah, that's amazing, Rachel. You kind of talked about this a little bit in that answer, but how do you kind of conquer those feelings of like being a freelancer and like overwhelm and not
Oh,
having work at like different points and like that's just being an actress in the city.
right. And I mean, it looks a little different for everybody, but I think what's really helpful for me to remind myself of is the overwhelm and the blues, the kind of blues you can get from after a gig, but not having anything else planned, the sort of in between time is
Yeah.
a unique experience to our profession as artists.
Hmm.
That's the one thing I have to remind myself is that when I get down and I get anxiety about it, because of course I'm human, I do, I I have to remind myself that like this is not a unique experience for artists, right? Like it's something, and freelancers in general. So I have a few things. Therapy.
Mm.
I have it today and I'm really looking forward to it. I go to
Great.
therapy once a week and I'm happy to share my therapy resource too, because it's a great place that as a rolling or a sliding scale, and it's just a really good community of therapists.
Mm.
Um, but I do therapy. That for me is essential. So whatever that looks like for people, I think it's really important for artists, for everybody, but I think specifically for artists. My schedule is all over the place. So I'm coming off of a 7 stint show. I worked 7 straight shifts at my restaurant
Wow.
as of last night. That is not normal. I normally do 3 to 4 days a week, depending on, sometimes I have more income from other acting gigs than, and when I don't, I pick up shifts. But everybody was sick at my work this week. I kept getting called. I was like, yeah, 7 days, 7 shifts straight.
Wow.
Over Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Over 5 days I did 7 shifts.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, that's really hard for, and then today I have therapy, I have rehearsal for my solo show, and tomorrow is like kind of a day off. And I think it's really hard when you're a freelancer and you, in our gig economy, to actually give yourself a day off,
Yeah,
because I feel like I'm
definitely.
always supposed to be looking for more work because I don't have consistent work in my field. Um, I'm a dialect coach. I just got to coach, actually, the character, James Spader's character on Blacklist has to speak Portuguese. I speak Portuguese. And through some connections I made through grad school, I was brought on set a couple weeks ago and I got to be his personal Portuguese coach and dialect coach, which was also an incredible way to be on set. To get to be behind the scenes in that way. And again, like a great paycheck, but that came out of nowhere. I found out a week before it was going to happen, and then it happens. So anyways, therapy is huge. Finding a little bit of routine in your day. I try to run most mornings,
Mm.
but when it's like raining gray like today, I don't. Um, Gratitude practice. I've just recently, it sounds a little corny, but the book I've been using is,
No.
like it's something I've finally was like, I think I need something in the morning to like ground myself right when I wake up, so I don't immediately go to Instagram, be like, who watch my stories? Because I
Yeah,
definitely do that. It's an addiction.
it
Um,
really is.
so yeah, so a gratitude practice for me is really huge.
Mm.
That I've started just in the last month, and having really good people that you trust around you. And as I've gotten older, that's been easier to do. I
That's
think,
great.
yeah, as I've got into my 30s, I feel like my needs and my wants really started to crystallize, and what important boundaries were for me, which is really difficult for me sometimes to define, has started to crystallize, and that it became clear, oh, okay, certain people maybe I don't really need in my life, or at least not so often, or not in this capacity, but also that all came through a lot of therapy.
Yeah, makes
So
a lot of sense.
yeah.
Thanks for talking about that.
Yeah.
Um, can you tell me about like your fall traditions in New York City?
Oh yeah.
Fall.
Oh man, I love fall. Um, Fall traditions. Well, upstate New York is not far away, and it's amazing. And I try to get at least one trip in during the fall up there.
Oh,
Um,
amazing.
yeah, and actually, a friend of mine and I, Saturday night, there's more like Saturday afternoon, went to Williamsburg where there's like a big beer hall, and we did like a little Oktoberfest.
That's so fun.
Oktoberfest beers and brats and things like that. That was sort of something that we wanted to do for the fall. Also, I had I just like walk around the block. I just like I just like walk around and breathe in the cooler air and try to enjoy it that way. But those are some things I like, or like apple cider, and definitely watching Hocus Pocus.
Oh,
And
so good.
I know.
I just watched Halloween Town this
I
weekend.
we don't even watch that in
I
forever.
love it. It's so good. Yeah. um, Getting into like our subject on like feminism and gender, what do you think it means to be a woman today? And I know that's like an ever shifting definition. It can be different in like 30 seconds or tomorrow. But what do you think it means for you right
Yeah,
now?
I'll start by saying like I am a cisgendered white woman. I identify the gender I identify as now as woman was the gender I was born with and assigned at birth. And I do think it's weird. This is where sort of like so many contradictions come in for me, because I do think so much of it has been taught to me, how I'm supposed to be as the gender I am as a woman, right? I've been socialized in our system, been taught. I don't think it's a completely inherent.
Sorry, Rachel, you just cut out.
I'm sorry.
Oh, now I can hear you. Sorry, you were saying you've been socialized.
Yeah, I've been socialized like so many, we've been socialized, so we've been taught these ways. I don't think it's necessarily inherent. Like, yes, I have ovaries that sometimes I feel like I don't like love every child I see, but for some reason lately I'm like, oh my God, baby. But if we're getting into anatomy, does that mean I want a kid? Not necessarily, but I think like shaving my legs and my armpits. I do that. I shave. I keep myself like shaven, right? In my pubic region, my legs and my armpits. And I think that that's like, sometimes I'm like, why do I do that? That is something that's been sort of taught to me, that's what's beautiful. That's a standard of beauty. And that's what's different than me and a man. And yet I still do it. And I know that, and I'm aware of that. And it doesn't make me not a feminist, right? It doesn't make me not care about women's issues and trans women's issues and gender issues as a whole. But I think I think I think it's still a standard of beauty that I'm adhering to that is a male standard of beauty. And so that's sort of, I think being a woman today is how it was before too. It's really hard. I think we're still second class citizens.
Mm.
I think, I think how everybody navigates that is how they is so personal. But for me, I'm at conflict a lot. I'm a pretty dominant person in my, daily like social life. And but also then when I'm with a partner, a romantic partner, I kind of want to be led sometimes. And what does that mean? And does that mean I'm adhering again? I think it means constantly questioning, like
Mm.
constantly questioning, like, what's this dynamic, which can drive you nuts sometimes. And sometimes it's like, fuck it, just enjoy it. Sorry, can I say that?
Yeah, sure.
Just enjoy it. So I think that for me is what it is. And I also have a lot of privilege being a white woman. And I feel like I personally need to use that privilege on behalf of women who it's not palatable for them to speak up, women of color, queer women of color, trans women of color, I think it's a lot. It's a heavy, heavy burden.
To be a woman.
Yeah,
It always has been.
exactly. I don't think, and of course, I'm not being pessimistic and saying like nothing's changed, but I don't think that's changed.
Mm.
I think, yeah.
What do you mean by being second class citizens? Like, what do you think are the problems that we face today as women?
Well, equal pay is still not a thing.
Yeah.
And I think, um, I think that there are little, again, like little social things that are just socialized in us that like I'm immediately taken less seriously.
Mm.
I mean, these are just like things that are socialized that it's going to take so much work for everyone to undo. I think it's the same with racism, like these things that we've been taught and socialized to believe, and they're so ingrained that it's like we need to catch ourselves on them. So I think like, I guess by second class, I mean reproductive rights, healthcare, that like my healthcare is more expensive because I'm a woman.
The pink tax.
Yes, the pink tax. I think we need to take advantage of our institutions like Planned Parenthood. Like, however you might feel about things, I just think those institutions are here for the people. Like when I go into Planned Parenthood and I see the swath of women that are all different backgrounds that are in there, that looks very different than other doctor's offices that you can go to. And I think like the fact that I got my IUD for free there means that like I can date and have sex the way that I want. Of course, I still like use protection in other ways and stuff, but like I don't have to worry about getting pregnant and then having to make the decision to have an abortion or to have the child and then change my entire life. I don't know. I think, yeah.
What do you think are some concrete ways that we can go about? I mean, I think what you're saying too is that it's just like kind of a constant battle, both with society, but also in our own heads of where we are as women and at the moment, or with our partners or what have you. But are there things that you do in your life? I mean, you have a performance all about this. That's what we should be watching, but.
Yeah. I mean, I do think, like I said, like I think supporting Planned Parenthood, whatever that looks like for you, like if that means just going to them, or if that means donating a little bit of money if you can, I also understand how money can be very tight. I donate a little bit. I'm a member of the ACLU. And I think really there's so many causes out there right now, and you just have to kind of choose one, I think, or two, because I don't have money to just be donating to every cause that needs it. So I think pick a couple that are really important to you and decide how you want to support them. Of course, protesting is great, but I also think, I think, I, I think I'm trying to think of smaller ways, smaller like daily ways that we can
I
make.
think even just talking about it
Yes, totally.
is, for so long we've been silenced, or
Mhm.
our voices haven't been heard. And I think by just even having this conversation, I think it's a way to think about things a little differently, at least.
Totally. I think also reading about different experiences than your own. Like I recently read Janet Mock's, who produces and helps direct Pose on FX, the show Pose. She is a trans woman of color. I think just prefers to go by woman of color, but her book Redefining Realness is incredible, and it's talks about her gender reassignment surgery and how she paid for it and all that. Anyways, it's a fantastic book, and she's a woman living in our world today, and her experience is very different than my own, and I think it's really important. And I don't certainly wouldn't claim to like be an expert on that experience, having read that book, and that's also just her experience, and she does a really good job in her book of saying like this isn't the definitive trans woman of color experience, this is mine. And it's not a monolith, right? Like white culture, white patriarchal culture presents most of these things in plays, in theater, in movies. Like that experience of the others is just like a monolith, right? And anyways, reading books, like I think just like challenging yourself in that way, like pick up a book like that and read it and understand it and an experience outside of your own.
I think that's a great idea, Rachel. Thank you.
Yeah.
So if a woman walked up to you and you had like 30 seconds to give them your best piece of advice, I mean, we've already gotten a lot from you. What would you say to them? And it could be about anything.
I'd say go get yourself a pedicure today.
That sounds great.
Maybe that, or maybe just like, I don't know, pat yourself on the back. Also, it depends on who it is. Really, like the context of who's asking me,
That's true.
Right? Again, as I've said, like as a white cis woman, like my experience is so different. So I think that answer would depend on who is asking me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Rachel, what is next for you, and where can we find like your next shows and all of your information?
Yeah, so my website is www.rachelgriesinger.com, RACHELGRIE Singer. I needs a little update. But mostly if you really want to like see what I'm doing, my Instagram at Photos by Rach, photo with an F, FOTOSBYRACH. You'll see my toilet times there. And more info about my show, Woke Pussy, is in a month. Hopefully you'll see me on an episode of something soon. And I'm auditioning, and I tour a show as Anne Frank as well. It's another one of my jobs. So I'll be around doing that. Yeah, maybe you'll see me walking around.
Hooray!
If you live in New York. I know a lot of listeners don't. Sorry.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to add for our listeners?
I'm proud of myself. I'm 32 and I just finally downloaded a budgeting app. So
Yay!
has anxiety about money, which I think is pretty normal for our generation. I think be tender and kind to yourself when it comes to things like that, because we're dealing with a lot. But also hold yourself accountable. How can you help?
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you for being on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. And I got to see your face. I never
I
get to see
know, it was great. Amazing.